Imagine this, the sheer, heart-dropping panic. Picture a team of heavily armed guards, right? They're swinging open the heavy steel door of a maximum security cell inside an inescapable fortress. They fully expect to find their high-profile prisoner securely locked away, but instead, the bed is neatly made. The belongings are perfectly untouched. The cell is, literally, terrifyingly empty, except for maybe a thin layer of construction dust. So how does a human being just vanish into thin air? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're unlocking the files on the absolute craziest, most audacious prison escapes in human history. To figure out how you escape an inescapable fortress, well, sometimes you have to look down. Back at 8:50 p.m., inside Mexico's absolute most secure prison, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was pacing his cell. The surveillance cameras watched him step into the shower area, right in the corner of his room. And then, 25 minutes later, he was just gone. Poof! When guards finally went in to investigate, they found this perfectly cut rectangular hole in the concrete floor of the shower, just barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. That hole dropped into a brilliantly engineered mile-long tunnel ending beneath an unfinished house in a neighborhood called Santa Juanita. And listen, this wasn't just some dirt hole. No way. It was lined with electric lights, it had air ducts pumping in fresh oxygen, and get this, a motorcycle mounted on custom rails that they'd been using for months just to haul the dirt out. Section 1. Engineering the impossible, patience, blueprints, and precision. Okay, let's dive into this. Because an escape like that definitely doesn't just happen on a whim. It requires intense logistical planning, methodical execution, and really insider precision. Take the legendary 1962 Alcatraz Escape, for example. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers spent 6 whole months widening the ventilation ducts beneath their sinks. And how did they do it? They used discarded saw blades, dining hall spoons, and get this, a drill they actually built from a vacuum cleaner motor. All while playing accordion music just to hide the noise of their work. They even placed these creepy dummy heads on their pillows, crafted from soap, concrete dust, and real hair from the barber shop. Then, they climbed a utility corridor to a secret workshop where they'd hand-stitched 50 stolen raincoats into a rubber raft. Finally, they slid down a 50-foot kitchen vent pipe and pumped up their raft at exactly 11:40 p.m. Unfortunately, their accomplice, Alan West, was tragically trapped behind because the concrete around his vent had hardened just a bit too much for him to fit through. Now that brings us to this massive number, 4. That's the number of times Yoshi Shiratori successfully escaped from Japanese prisons. He'd previously picked locks using just a metal bucket wire and pushed his way through rotting wood frames. But jump to the winter of 1942, and he was at a Bashiri prison. We're talking Japan's harshest, northernmost, totally freezing prison. He was chained to the floor with custom-made handcuffs. So what did he actually do? For 2 straight years, he painstakingly poured his daily ration of salty miso soup onto the links of his handcuffs until they completely rusted and broke. I mean, talk about patience. Then, in just an agonizing, visceral feat of endurance, he literally dislocated his own shoulders so he could squeeze through a tiny little food slot in his door. Unbelievable. Section 2. Hiding in plain sight. The psychology and art of disguise. Now, what's really interesting about this is how while some folks engineer their way out of concrete and steel, others take a completely different approach. They rely on audacious psychology and straight-up deception. Look at the sheer contrast here between perception and reality at Bangu 3 prison in Rio de Janeiro. The guards watched what they thought was a 19-year-old girl in a pink donut cartoon shirt walking toward the exit, just keeping her head down. But the reality? It was the inmate, Silva. He had actually swapped places with his daughter during a morning visit. He was wearing this highly realistic silicone mask, a long black wig, glasses, and yep, even a bra. Authorities suspect all these items were smuggled in by a pregnant visitor who managed to bypass the usual guard searches. But hey, Silva definitely wasn't the first to use costume theatrics. Let's travel all the way back to an 1840s Australian penal colony for honestly one of the most bizarre escapes ever recorded. So this convict, George Billy Hunt, noticed that the guards completely ignored the kangaroos hopping around near the prison grounds. So what does Billy do? He manages to kill a kangaroo, perfectly skins it in one single piece, and basically creates a full-body kangaroo suit. Getting down on all fours, he successfully hopped his way right to the edge of the prison boundary. It was a flawless, if entirely absurd plan. That is, until a bored, super hungry guard spotted him and decided to use the kangaroo for target practice.
So, staring down the barrel of a rifle, Hunt was forced to make a quick choice: take a bullet for someone's dinner or reveal his true identity. He obviously pulled off the skin and surrendered. The authorities, who maintained a deadly serious grip on their colony, while they were not amused by his theatrical genius, they made a pretty brutal example of him, which brings us to the number 150. Hunt received 150 punishing lashes with a whip, pretty much ensuring he never tried to disguise himself as an animal ever again.
Section 3. Airborne Escapes and Shootouts, Hijackings and High-Stakes Action. When the quiet approach fails, some inmates just completely abandon stealth and rely on absolute firepower and speed. Enter the Leakage Committee. Inside Argentina's Rawson prison, 110 prisoners attempted this massive, highly coordinated escape led by Mario Roberto Santuccio of the Workers' Revolutionary Party. This six-person vanguard was literally designed to violently clear the path. They shot their way right past the guards, tearing through the corridors to reach a waiting getaway car at the front of the prison, and then sped off toward Trelew Airport. But in operations this massive, things can break down in a matter of seconds. At T0, because of a miscommunication in signals, the remaining 104 inmates reached the entrance only to find absolutely no vehicles waiting for them. Just nothing. Minutes later, 19 desperate prisoners managed to hijack 3 street taxis and order the drivers to gun it to the airport. But look at T-plus takeoff. By the time those taxis finally arrived, an Austral BAC 111 airliner, which had already been hijacked from the inside by disguised guerrilla supporters, was lifting off the runway. The 6 committee leaders successfully flew to Chile, seeking refuge under Socialist President Salvador Allende, but those 19 taxi-riding escapees, they were just moments too late. Out of 110 people, only 6 actually succeeded.
Sometimes, though, high-stakes action requires highly specialized tools. Enter angel wire. This stuff is insane. It's a diamond-encrusted wire capable of slicing straight through solid steel bars. At Queensland's Sir David Longland Prison, an inmate named Abbott and 4 others used this exact type of wire, working inch by excruciating inch over several agonizing hours to completely cut their way out of their cells. Once they were free, they sprinted across the yard toward a perimeter fence that was absolutely loaded with security sensors.
So the crucial point here is exactly how they overcame that final, practically impossible sensor barrier. An accomplice named Brennan Barachon, who had just been released a few months prior, was waiting right outside and threw bolt cutters over the fence. The second Abbott breached the wire, the alarm started screaming. Guards immediately accelerated towards them in a patrol vehicle, but Barachon raised a gun and opened fire, completely disabling the guard's vehicle in a total hail of bullets. That panicked, chaotic gunfire bought Abbott just enough time to cut the final section of wire, allowing all 5 men to squeeze through and completely vanish into the Queensland night. And hey, if a getaway car isn't quite dramatic enough for you, how about a getaway chopper? Lucy Dudko hired pilot Timothy Joyce at the Sydney airport under the guise of an Olympic Park air tour. Sounds nice, right? Well, mid-air, she pulled a pistol on him and ordered the choppers straight to Silverwater Correctional Center. Down below, inmate John Killick was waiting in the exercise yard. The helicopter literally landed right on the prison oval. Guards rushed the field and opened fire, putting at least 2 bullets directly into the aircraft. Yet somehow, Killick climbed in and the bullet-riddled chopper lifted off, kicking off a massive, international, headline-making manhunt that lasted 45 days across Victoria and New South Wales. Just wild.
Section 4. Chaos, Fire, and Deception. Exploiting disasters and systemic failures. We've seen master engineering, crazy disguises, and sheer firepower. But what happens when inmates exploit the everyday human vulnerabilities and the systemic failures of the prison protocol itself? Take the deeply chilling deception of Thabo Bester in South Africa. A midnight fire broke out in his cell at the Mangaung Correctional Center, leaving behind a body burned totally beyond recognition. The Department of Correctional Services officially declared him dead. Case closed, right? Actually, not quite. Months later, journalists Marisha Dammons and Daniel Stain revealed postmortem results showing the body was dead before the fire even started. A corpse had literally been smuggled in. Then, a celebrity doctor tried to claim the body as Bester's customary wife. And the ultimate twist? Journalists soon published photographs of Bester, very much alive, casually grocery shopping with that exact same doctor in Santon City. He had lived freely for nearly a year while everyone believed he was Ash, forcing a massive and honestly humiliating government admission. Or consider what happens when the Earth itself shatters a prison's security, triggering our absolute most basic human vulnerability. 216. That is the staggering number of inmates who fled Malir Jail in Karachi during a midnight earthquake. You see, this facility was severely overcrowded. It was holding 5,000 inmates in a space that was originally designed for only 2,200. So when the ground shook and the walls trembled, absolute survival panic just took over. Prisoners didn't break their doors to escape the law, they broke them to avoid being crushed to death by the collapsing structure.
In the chaotic aftermath, the prison superintendent defended his facility to the BBC with this pretty striking claim. He said, this wasn't a security failure, it was a natural disaster. And honestly, it highlights the sheer scale of the chaos. Even as police fired warning shots into the air, which, by the way, actually convinced a lot of the inmates it was safer to just run back into their cells, the security forces were completely overwhelmed. The police went door to door, managing to recapture about 80 men, but over 130 inmates remained totally at large. This left completely frustrated families protesting outside the prison gates, just trying to get some basic information.
So, reviewing all of this evidence leaves us with one really provocative question. What is the ultimate flaw in any high-security fortress? Is it the thickness of the concrete, the height of the steel fences, or maybe the reach of the guard towers? Well, no. As we've seen today, the biggest flaw in literally any inescapable system is human predictability, our vulnerability to deception, and the absolute unstoppable force of human desperation. Whether it's a tunnel dug with a stolen spoon, a fake silicone face, or just exploiting the tremors of an earthquake, human ingenuity will always test the limits of its cage. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the impossible.